Adjourn the, call to order. The meeting of the Longview Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board. You are fined $50. Meeting agenda, 10 a.m., Thursday, October 9, 2014, at the City Hall, Council Chamber, 300 West Cotton Street. Number one, we'll have a safety message from the Texas Department of Transportation, Mr. Dennis Cooley, who's our new district engineer. Mr. Cooley?
Thank you, Judge Stout. Just real quick, every morning we receive a notification about the amount of crashes and fatalities that has happened over the last, during the current calendar year. And as of today, across Texas, there's been 2,196 crashes, which wound up with, within those crashes, there were 2,446 fatalities.
Wow.
It's really amazing with the amount of people that travel our great state, and with all the public education that we try to provide, that we still routinely have people who are texting and driving, distracted driving, driving under the influence or impaired by some form or fashion, and then in addition to that, not wearing their seat belts. Sad to say that this part of Texas has a very high crash rate and a very high fatality rate. So every chance we get, we try to promote the fact that you don't text and drive, and that you know, if you're going to partake, then you do so intelligently and have a designated driver, and as well as always wear your seatbelt. It doesn't matter where you're going or how far you're going. Be sure you put your seatbelt on. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Judge.
Right. Thank you, Dennis. Number two on the agenda is approval of the July 16, 2014 Policy Board minutes. Ms. Karen Owens, Longview MPO.
Thank you, Judge Stout. On behalf of the Longview Metropolitan Planning Organization, I'd like to extend a welcome to everyone to today's meeting. Thank you for your interest in transportation. Board members, the minutes were provided in your briefing materials and sent out prior to today's meeting. Are there any changes or revisions to the meeting minutes? If not, then the action before the board is to consider approval.
Do you have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Motion.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Number three, review of the draft MPO Thoroughfare Plan. Mr. Robert Ray, Kimley-Horn and Associates.
Great. I'd like to introduce Rob Ray. He is the consultant that the MPO has hired to do the MPO Regional Thoroughfare Plan, and there has been a great deal of work that has occurred, and Rob's going to go into a little bit of that detail. But today's presentation is a culmination of a lot of technical analysis and a lot of technical work to develop a Regional Thoroughfare Plan. And Rob, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, Chair and board members. I'm grateful to be here today to begin finalizing the draft thoroughfare plan that we've been working with the MPO staff and the technical committee on. I have a short presentation. The document should be in front of you. Here, the full document should be in front of you. And I have a short presentation to just briefly summarize the content that is within the document. There are a number of sections or number of major elements to this regional thoroughfare plan listed on the screen. There's 5 different sections that we emphasized, going through the process, developing the thoroughfare plan, and finalizing the recommendations. As was mentioned the last time that we talked about the thoroughfare plan to this board, there's a distinct difference between the MTP and the thoroughfare plan. And we just wanted to emphasize this, that the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which the MPO also conducts, is a financially constrained plan that looks at priority projects and also looks at multimodal elements within the region. Now, the thoroughfare plan, on the other hand, it determines alignments, it preserves right-of-way, and it establishes design standards for the region. It's a planning document, not a policy document, until it's adopted by jurisdiction cities or other municipalities in the region. The process that was involved in getting to this point of this draft document was really a number of steps that occurred. There was agency coordination, public involvement, and technical analysis, and that's what resulted in the Thoroughfare recommendations. The agency coordination included one work session with the technical committee early on in the process in May. Since that time, there was also 6 review meetings in which we discussed alternatives, different improvements throughout the region. There was also policy board updates, this one being the 3rd update for this group. And then, and on top of that, we also coordinated with the Longview, the City of Longview Comprehensive Plan, the working group there, both consisting of City of Longview staff and the consultant that's helping them out with the comprehensive plan. As well, in part of the process, we reached out to the public in July to get feedback on different issues in the region when it comes to transportation and thoroughfare elements. There are over 350 surveys that were conducted by the MPO that helped to give us guidance on the thoroughfare plan recommendations. And lastly, there was a technical analysis that was conducted. Using the travel demand model that TxDOT has developed, we were able to work with the technical committee on developing 4 different alternatives within the region and going through a refinement of those alternatives. It takes level of service on the roadways between now, 2010, or at least the base year of 2007, and out to 2040. You can see in the table on the screen that each of the scenarios, starting off with scenario 1, which is essentially a no build, and going out, and as we included projects through scenario 2, scenario 3, scenario 4, we were able to compare regional measures of effectiveness, such as vehicle miles traveled, delayed, and lanes added. You can see here that a typical level of service map showing green where it's uncongested roadways to red that are congested roadways. This resulted in some recommendations that we had through street types, context, and street design elements. And just briefly, there was 4 different street types or functional classification types that we're recommending in this document. Principal arterial, which looks at 120 feet of right-of-way. Minor arterial, which looks at 100 feet of right-of-way or preserves 100 feet of right-of-way. Major collector at 80 feet of right-of-way, and a minor collector at 60 feet of right-of-way. And each one of these we developed a set cross-section, a typical section for each of those functional classification types. A summary of that is located in the executive summary, showing each of the functional class and their broad level design elements, such as number of lanes, width of medians, center turn lanes, and sidewalk and utility considerations. In looking at thoroughfare planning, we also look at context, because the way that we design streets in an urban area sometimes can be different than a suburban area or a rural area. And so looking at that, the images on the screen show different examples of those context types and the differences in design that takes place in those areas is important. The area has different, the Longview region does have different context areas, from downtown Longview, Gladewater, to some of the suburban commercial areas along 281 and suburban residential and rural areas. The streets designed in each of those may differ. Also looking at street design elements, we looked at considerations for utility location and making sure that there's enough buffer on the side outside of the travel way to provide for utility locations, pedestrian amenities, possible bicycle improvements, and transit infrastructure, as all part of the regional thoroughfare plan. And the recommendations on page, I believe, Page 42 of the document is the roadway design recommendations, and what this does is shows all of the thoroughfare plans, the entire region, the thoroughfare plan, and all the functional classified roads within the region. This map was the status of this map took a lot of months to get refined with the technical committee to make sure all the roads were balanced and reflected the needs that were projected from the growth in the region in the next 25 years. Also looking at pedestrian design and what the appropriate widths, depending on the context, should be for pedestrian design in the areas. Transit and allowing for appropriate infrastructure, primarily with pedestrians, making sure people can get to stops with sidewalks and other infrastructure like that. And then we looked at bicycle design. There's a number of corridors that we identified as strategic corridors that could have bicycle implementation incorporated into them. For many of the streets that we looked at, we provided 2 recommendations for bicycle incorporation, such as bike lanes or shared lanes, if and when those roads would become reconstructed. And with that summarizes the document. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Ray?
I would like to add that this document is out for public review for a 30-day public comment period, and we will be bringing this back to the Policy Board for consideration of its ultimate approval on November 10th. Additionally, there have been some discussions, and I've been reaching out with the City of Gladewater. I'll be presenting at their City Council meeting next week to let them know about the Thoroughfare Plan and to give them a little more information and see how they'd like to use that in their community. This is a regional thoroughfare plan, so we can have some continuity as we look towards the future, but it also allows each entity, each city, to consider adopting some city ordinances where there would be some type of enforcement, how they can guide their community. But once again, that is a local decision. We have this tool available, and if they're interested in adopting and making some changes to their city policies, that they're welcome to do that.
Okay. Mr. Vaughn?
Yes, Karen. It's been a while. We've been here a while. When was the last time we did something this thorough, or have we?
This is the first MPO-wide thoroughfare plan, so this is
Okay.
the first of its kind.
Okay, and our funding we got extra funding, and we used part of our dollars to do that.
We use part of our MPO planning dollars.
Okay.
Yes, we certainly do.
Any other questions? Mr. Ray, thank you. Number 4 on the agenda is transportation survey results. Mr. Brett Huntsman, Longview MPO. Brett?
Thank you, Justice House. As you may know, we did a survey from July 6th to August 15th. This survey is designed to give us feedback and direction on our long-term plan, which we'll be discussing here in a moment. The survey was 12 questions, and it also provided an opportunity to leave comments and information if they wanted to be added to our distribution list. As Rob mentioned, we had a little over 350 respondents. 92% of those respondents completed the survey online. The other 8% completed hard copies. And we also sent out a copy in the Longview News Journal that they cut out, responded, and mailed back to us. Moving on, really what I wanted to do today was just give you highlights of the survey results. And one of the first questions that we asked was, what zip code did the respondent live in? That way we could get an idea of where our responses are coming from and also give us the ability to look at location-specific issues. So as you can see on the slide, we had 280 respondents from Longview. That's about 79%. The next top 2 were Gladewater and White Oak with 19 and 18 respondents, respectively. We also had respondents from Kilgore, Glenwood Acres, Hallsville, Lakeport, and 4% of that was from other regions outside of our planning or proximity to planning area. The next question that we'd like to ask is how we rate congestion in the area. As transportation planners, we oftentimes get complaints about congestion or traffic lights, things like that. However, only 8% of respondents or 28% respondents said that our congestion level was poor. while 33% rated it as fair, and 59% rated it as good or very good. Another highlight is we asked the public to rank elements in order of how important they should be in the prioritization process. And the number one ranking was reducing accidents, followed by providing better access to jobs and shopping and attracting business to the region. This is significant to us because our current project prioritization process puts the highest emphasis on safety. And so having the public respond to that in the same way that that our policy board and technical committee wanted to go, that's a big win for us, and I think we're moving in the right direction with our prioritization process. Another question that gave us some good feedback is we asked for improvements, and what we did was we gave the public a fictional $100, and this did two things. One, it gave the public idea that agencies work on a limited budget, and there's only so much we can do with the available funding. And it also lets them put importance where they like to put it, and then not so much money in areas that they don't find as important. So we found that maintenance was the highest importance. It received the most amount of money on average. This is also important to our prioritization process because maintenance of our roads is the second most weighted factor in determining new projects. It was also followed by new roadways and sidewalks, which we've heard is an outcry from the public as well right now. The last question I wanted to highlight was about Longview Transit. We asked the public, for those who didn't ride it, which was a very small or a very large percentage of the respondents had never ridden Longview Transit before. We asked them, okay, to ride Longview Transit, what would make it more appealing? And the most common answer was more convenient routes and times. And this is something that is not an overnight fix. Longview Transit is moving in the right direction. Their ridership has increased every year since their inception, and they're moving in the right direction, and the public just, I guess, needs to be patient on that one. The transit's moving in the right direction. But the second is a cell phone application that riders, when they're waiting on the side of the road to ride the bus, it would let them know when their bus is approaching, so they wouldn't have to wait as long. This is something that's Longview Transit is now working on, determining the feasibility of it and looking at possible funding sources to have that accomplished. And then some additional comments. The respondents said that traffic congestion was the most important challenge facing our area. 28.5% of that, and then followed by deteriorating pavement. The most avoided roads because of congestion are Loop 281, Highway 80, and 4th Street. And one of the biggest intersections was Loop 281 and 4th Street, but coincidentally also one of our highest volume areas. The majority of the comments highlighted mobility and safety issues, and this is where we asked for any additional comments to the survey. Most of them were about new roadways, widening roadways, and safety on those roadways. And then lastly, 112 respondents asked to join our email distribution list, and 18 our mailing, which is the hard copies list. So that's just 130 more people that are getting transportation information in our area, and I think that's a big win for us. So I'd like to open up to any questions if anybody had any.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Brett? I guess not. Thank you, Brett.
And I also wanted to mention that this was distributed to the policy board as well as technical committee and our public transportation advisory committee, a full version, and we have full versions of the survey results available if you'd like to look through it a little bit more in depth. So thank you.
Only one comment I would make is that even though we're a small county and a small community, we've got a lot of people traveling on these roads, and it's good that the public and what the leadership's deciding to try and do to try and relieve this congestion is on the same page, because that's exactly what, from the county standpoint, that I want to work with Longview and other cities to try and do what we can to help. So, thank you. Number 5, any other questions? Number 5 on the agenda is approval of project ranking criteria for Metropolitan Transportation Plan projects. Ms. Karen Owen.
Right. Thank you, Judge Stout. In order to develop a sound transportation plan to meet the mobility needs of the greater Longview area, we use multiple technical tools, and you've already heard a little bit about this. One such tool is a computer travel demand model. The travel demand model is used to predict what the street and highway system will need to look like to handle future transportation needs. And the MPO has hired, of course, Kimley-Horn and Associates, Rob and his group and his team to work alongside our technical committee to take our travel model, run alternative scenarios where we compared roadways, and the computer model is used to answer such questions as, how does one road or one new road widening project impact the rest of the network? And where's the greatest need for widening roads in the future? So in simplest terms, this model that we use guides our decisions to determine which projects will give us the greatest benefit. A second technical tool is this agenda item that the MPO uses. Is the process of evaluating a very long list of candidate projects. We have a lot of needs out there, so we use this tool to work through that and look at the list of candidate projects according to a specific criteria, and we rank them in priority order. We started with the goals developed by the Transportation Board at the May workshop, and from there we created a standard by which projects are evaluated. We also took the public's input, and we've heard from the survey results and our public meetings that this is what's important to them reinforces what we are seeing, and the technical committee is recommending be some of the highest evaluation measures. This valuation standard, I'd like to also say, was developed with a major emphasis on performance-based planning. We also wanted to align our new goals with the new federal requirements of MAP 21. Safety in the Longview MPO region was discussed, and it's picked as the most important transportation element to consider when we rank projects. As stated earlier, the TxDOT-Tyler district, which covers a large portion of the MPO planning area, has one of the highest crash rates in the state. Maintenance of the existing roadway pavement is the second highest priority in the region. With the amount of truck traffic in our area, many of the roads face a greater need for pavement replacement and resurfacing. Of course, pavement quality can affect the safety and the capacity of a roadway. Congestion and freight improvements are important elements of the transportation network, and ensuring that freight can get to its destination with limited interruption is important for the economy. Due to the industry and the amount of point source emissions, air quality is an issue for our area. High amounts of truck traffic with Interstate 20 proximity, mobile source emissions are a growing source of pollution. Reducing congestion through operational or capacity improvements can help reduce the environmental impacts, and it's very important when we prioritize projects. The discussion of transportation choices is relatively new. Focusing primarily on the automobile has been the trend that we've seen in the past for transportation improvements. However, increasing demand has been, we're seeing that more folks are asking for multimodal options such as walking, biking, and transit. And of course, new legislation requires that bike accommodations are provided and considered on new state roadways. Due to limited funding for transportation at all levels of government, the funds that are spent on projects should be focused also that improve the economic vitality of the region. So these are the broad goals that we are using for the transportation plan, and this is how these goals are being incorporated into a priority ranking program. From this point, the MPO Policy Board and Technical Committee discussed how important each of these goals are. Using the goals as a basis for the evaluation criteria, the MPO Technical Committee worked with Rob Ray's group with Kimley-Horn Associates to not only create, but also test an evaluation standard with an emphasis on these performances. Safety is weighted at 30%, and we looked at the accident crash rates as a 3-year average and compared it with the statewide crash rates for similar corridors based on that roadway type. So if the roadway's crash was lower than the statewide average, the project received the lowest score. If the crash rate was higher than the state average, more points were given depending on how higher that crash rate was. Another priority expressed by the Policy Board and Technical Committee is functional classification, and that's weighted at 25%. And this measure looks at the comparison of project and their weighting based on their functional classification designations, such as whether it's a freeway or a principal arterial, minor arterial, major collector, and so forth. Higher scores are given to those roadways that are more regionally significant. And what this does is this gives an emphasis to high-volume roadways and freight routes. In the greater Longview area, pavement quality and maintenance are important elements of the transportation network. Pavement quality, as I mentioned before, can affect the safety and the capacity of a roadway. To gather the pavement data for this measure, we used the City of Longview as well as the Texas Department of Transportation's pavement management information systems. They have up-to-date systems, and the weighting for this measure is weighted at 20%. Air quality is another measure, and we wanted to promote projects that reduce air quality impacts, and that's weighted at 10%. Improving traffic congestion and delay is one way to reduce those emissions. And then we get to economic benefit. And this measure looks at how each project, the benefits from each of them, benefit the economic vitality of the area and in the region. So for these projects that are located in areas with potential commercial or economic benefit, they get scored a little bit higher. And for those projects with little or no potential of development or redevelopment, they're scored the lowest. And this factor was weighted at 5%. Multimodal choices, and this is one because there is, of course, a heightened interest in MAP 21. We looked at multimodal improvements and how would the existing project look for incorporating a transit concept, or is it along a transit route? Does it connect with the transit route? The opportunity for perhaps bicycle and some pedestrian improvements. And so during the MTP survey that we conducted, as well as the city's comprehensive plan public meeting that they had, we heard that these projects are very important to many citizens. So higher scores get assigned to projects that integrate multiple modes of travel, and low scores are assigned to those projects that only focus on vehicle trips. And once again, multimodal choices is 5%. The last factor, of course, is congestion, and the greater the percentage change in reducing congestion, the higher the score. And this measure concludes it and brings us to the 100 points. So we essentially have 7 performance measures that we use to rank and prioritize a project. We used our technical data to sort these projects and looked at those as well. We looked at the pavement crash records, pavement data crash records, and that way we could make clear comparisons looking at the benefit of each candidate project. So this method gives us what I would call a systematic and a quantitative methodology by which we can score projects for our Longview MPO area. So that concludes my presentation and my remarks on this item. Are there any questions about the evaluation criteria and the weighting factors that we're proposing for approval today?
Any questions for Ms. Owen? Karen, as always, you do a great job. I guess there's just no questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. You want to take it?
Yes,
Ask
and
for
we
a
need a,
motion?
pardon? Yes.
Motion?
Do we are going to need a motion to approve this criteria? Do I have a motion to approve the project ranking as presented?
So moved.
Do a motion? And a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. Number 6, review of the draft Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Ms. Owen?
Thank you. Today's meeting is the first of 2 public meetings to review and ultimately adopt the long-term transportation plan. And as many of you know, the MTP, for short, is a comprehensive plan to respond to the transportation needs for the upcoming 25 years. The major components of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan are streets, highways, and bridges, pedestrian and bicycle, public transportation, traffic operations, and pavement maintenance. And I'll highlight this document. Board members, you have copies. This document is about 115 pages in length. It's the culmination of many, many months of technical analysis. I will get to, I know you probably are wondering what projects came to the top, so we'll get to that in just a moment. Let me talk a little bit about there's a chapter of multimodal. And I wanted to highlight, instead of explaining, pardon me, instead of going through the document, I'm just going to highlight some of the goals and some of the ideas that are coming out from our technical committee and using some of the information that the public has given us as well. The things that we want to focus on is that we want to ensure safe and accessible and convenient mobility between all forms of surface transportation. We also want to be able to investigate the feasibility of perhaps an incentives program to encourage development of transit-oriented developments, and they emphasize multimodal usage. We want to be able to utilize the MPO Thoroughfare Plan to increase multimodalism in future projects that we have. We'll also be investigating funding solutions for improvement that were identified in the Longview Pedestrian Transit Access Study, and that's a study that was concluded earlier this year, and we'd like to look for ways to find funding to improve pedestrian transit access. And then also take a look at and develop some strategies to connect LaTourneau University and our multimodal center to downtown Longview to increase that multimodalism concept. The focus with public transportation, bicycle, and pedestrian for the long term. We want to be able to identify unsafe pedestrian areas within the planning area and develop strategies to mitigate those hazards. We'd also like to determine the need and the benefits and consider perhaps an MPO-wide pedestrian and bicycle master plan. We'll be looking at finding methods to collect an inventory of all sidewalks within the MPO planning area so we know what we have, and we know that way we can take a look at where our greatest needs may be. And then also encourage the creation of safe pedestrian space along our corridors when we construct those that have high pedestrian traffic. All right, well, that brings me to the streets and highway plan. Since many of these projects are funded with federal dollars, the long-term plan must be financially constrained. In other words, the federal projects included in this plan are ones that are reasonably expected to be funded in the upcoming 25 years. There are other state and federal projects in this planning document identified in what we call a needs list. And based on current funding levels, we do not expect them to be funded in the 25-year horizon. All right, for street and highway projects. The projects, as you'll see on this slide, we do have a target year that's in the left-hand column as to when we expect these projects to go to construction, or we would like to see these projects go to construction. The technical committee, we all sat down and looked at a revenue forecast as well and took a look at which of these projects could be funded with which pots of funds and how the MPO could best utilize those dollars. So for the first 10 years of the MTP, of course, in 2015, we'll have the second phase of our George Ritchie project, which extends from 300 to McCann. In 2017, we're looking at US 80 in highway in the city of Gladewater to construct a center turn lane on the east side of town. Also in 2017, as far as a target year, we're looking at improving US 259. There's an intersection at Eden and Tryon Road. It's a six-legged intersection currently now, and that intersection severely compromises mobility. So we would like to do some intersection safety improvements and increase the mobility for that intersection and that major corridor. In 2019, the next high priority project that has been on the MPO's radar is the improvement of 2206 between Loop 281 and Fisher Road. The segment from Fisher Road to State Highway 42, as it has been, as some of the development of this project has occurred by TxDOT, we're realizing that the oil fields in the area in the right-of-way would from the section between Fisher Road and 42 are extremely high, somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 million. So we're going to take a look at pulling back at least on that section. TxDOT is going to continue doing the design work and environmental clearance for the entire segment of Harrison Road. But in terms of Fisher Road to 42, I think we're going to take a step back and examine that further and push that perhaps out. The greatest need along Harrison Road is between Loop 281 and Fisher Road, so we will cover the greatest need. In 2020, targeting year, in US 80, there's a section of US 80 in Gladewater on the west side that is a little small, narrow stretch. It's about 3/10 of a mile. It's 4 lanes on US 80, and then it narrows down to only 2 lanes, and that's between Mustang and Virginia. And our Tyler District Office is looking at ways to improve that and reconstruct that roadway to improve safety. Moving along, the next priority project that's been identified that's come up to the top is to widen the existing George Ritchie Road from 2 to 4 lanes. It's the section between Gilmer Road and Pine Tree Road. Following that, we would like to widen and do a continuation of George Ritchie and widen that all the way to FM 3272 or White Oak Road. The next project in this 10-year term is Spur 63, also known as, of course, signed as State Highway 31, and that's at one of our primary entrances into Longview. That's from South Street to McCann, and looking at widening that from 4 to 6 lanes. There's a little bit of challenge with that project because of the railroad bridge, but there's an extreme need in that area in terms of safety and mobility to do that improvement. All right, street and highway projects from 2025 to 2040. Looking at West Loop 281, this is kind of a small project, widening it from US 80 to Schaffner Road. FM 2208, or Alpine Road, widening that from 2 to 4 lanes between the Loop and US 259. East Loop 281, this is a segment just in the area between 4th and FM 2208, which is Alpine Road. We've also listed Toll 49. Since it's a priority of the net RMA, we've listed some construction estimates, and I do want to warn everyone that's watching this meeting and that's viewing the meeting today and present, that these dollars all have a 4% inflation factoring on them, as we're required to do so. So depending on the target year, that will allow an inflation factoring on those. And the net RMA's consultant did provide me with that estimate and looking at that target year. And that's a new 2-lane toll road somewhere between US 271 and US 259. And that alignment has not been defined, but we certainly wanted to put it in the plan in cooperation and working with the NetRMA on that project. East Loop 281 from 2208 to Page Road, and then West Loop 281 between FM 2206 to US 80. All right, highlighting the City of Longview projects. What we've done is we've taken the city projects, and using the travel demand model, we were able to predict a year in which these projects become a need. Now, currently, these are projects that our funding has not been identified specifically, except for the first project, the 4th Street project, extending that, a new four-lane divided roadway with a center turn lane between Hawkins Parkway and 259. That project is funded, but the remainder of these projects are ones that are listed as we've used them with the ranking criteria and such, and are identified in a target year. So we do have some pretty big needs, and I'm sure the City of Longview will, as City Council considers projects, we've just recently had there has been a bond package to do some improvements and such, and it would require an additional bond package to fund these projects as well. So the needs for some of these projects are Lake Lamond, widening that from 2 to 4 lanes, realigning Bill Owens, realigning and removing that double curve just north of US 80, Dundee Road from Gilmer to Pine Tree, widen that. Another widening is Real Road, which would be the second phase of widening Real from 2 to 4 lanes. Realigning Toller Road as it comes in to Loop 281. An extension of Spring Hill Road, where it currently dead ends or terminates at Judson Road, extending that to the east to Airline Road. Silver Falls Road is another project between Birch and US 80, and this is another Phase 2 project. Some of it's been widened from Pine Tree Road to Birch, and so we'd like to continue that project and extend it from Birch to US 80. And then also Bill Owens Parkway, another important project from Spring Hill Road, extending this as a new 4-lane roadway to George Ritchie. All right, as I mentioned, financial constraint. There are some unfunded needs that are out there. We have a lot of projects that are on Interstate 20. In terms of the next agenda item that I'll present, I'll be talking about some of the advisory committee reports recommendations, so looking at improving Interstate 20 as it's currently at capacity. There are other projects that are listed here, and I won't read through the list, but you can see them on your slide, and you can tell that there's quite a big price tag that are associated with these projects. Public involvement for the long-term transportation plan. Today begins a 30-day public comment period that will extend through November 10th. And copies of the draft Metropolitan Transportation Plan are available on our website. If you'll go to longviewmpo.com, you'll be able to click on this document and review it in detail if you'd like. We'll have copies available at the MPO office and also at the library for review. If you do have any questions, you may be watching the rebroadcast of today's meeting or watching it live, you can give me a call. I've got my phone number listed there. I have our email address and our P.O. box. You can send email to mpo@longviewtexas.gov. And with that, are there any questions?
Karen, I have one, and I might have missed it, but I think it's Heritage Road that comes into Eastman Road. Is that correct? Is that Heritage? Is that right? Right where the ball fields are and all the new development right there?
I think you're speaking...
Hawkins?
Yes, Hawkins.
And keeps going across Eastman Road and then goes into it from a 5-lane to a 3-lane to Tryon Road?
Yes.
Is that in here to be possibly looked at to widen at some point in time?
Well, what we did is we took a look at... all of the recommendations we're bringing to you today are model-based, and they're also ranked on the safety factors and such. So it's something that city staff did look at, but it did not come to the top of the list as a need based on all of the factors that we talked about today.
I'd be
At some point in time, it certainly will be
I'm
a
surprised
need.
if it will not be a need when they finish development out there.
Certainly.
Would you, Mr. Vaughn?
I agree.
Okay, any other questions for Karen?
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for looking at Gladewater with those turn lanes. That's a good start from, because the growth area is out that way going back towards White Oak. A lot of land there still commercial and undeveloped. And then the other way going towards Big Sandy, where we want to come down to one lane. But appreciate y'all putting that on the agenda and the future plans there. That'll sure help Gladewater on
You're welcome.
all that projects.
You can thank Mr. Cooley and Vernon Webb for working on that. They're really working to find some solutions.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Judge.
Yes, sir.
Karen, of course, as you know, the city's in the process of completing a long-term comprehensive plan for the city of Longview. And how will this transportation plan, how will that fit with the comprehensive plan that the city's working on? Or will it become a part of that, or?
Well, what it will do, and Rob kind of highlighted this during his presentation, the MTP, as I'm presenting it today, is very project-specific. The Thoroughfare Plan, and that's a portion of the comprehensive plan as well, guides how we develop our streets and such. So while these are specific projects, we'll use that Thoroughfare Plan when we get to the point of doing that design work to say, okay, let's take a look at the pedestrian realm, let's take a look at the bike lanes, and that will be our guide as we develop these projects
Okay,
over time.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Owen? Okay, thank you, Karen. Number 7, I-20 East Texas Corridor Advisory Committee update. Ms. Owen?
Could you launch it for me, please? I'm afraid I won't be able to do that. Thank you. Great. Thank you. I'd like to highlight some of the recommendations of the East Texas Corridor Study. I've presented this information in the past, but this study is coming to a close as an 18-month study that has occurred. Things will be wrapping up with this, and basically this study has been focused on evaluating safety and capacity needs along Interstate 20 in East Texas. There has been a corridor advisory committee comprised of 21 elected officials, and since July 2013, they have met every 2 months. Judge Bill Stout is our chairman of this group, and this is a corridor study that is looking at about a 155-mile stretch of Interstate 20 between Dallas County to the Texas-Louisiana state line. Throughout this summer and in the springtime, there were public meetings that were held, and TxDOT did several media blasts and such, and I wanted to get back with you and let you know what some of the most common public responses by county happen to be, and I'm going to highlight, of course, our counties. In Gregg County, one of the most common responses that were received from public comment were modifications of entrance and exit ramps, also adding a third lane of traffic, and they're also concerned about hazardous and wet road conditions. In Harrison County, some of those responses were adding a third lane of traffic, another repetitive theme here, and also adding frontage roads, and then also the reinforcement of adding entrance and exit ramps. The I-20 Corridor Draft Plan is nearly final, and we're making recommendations that will go out to the public, of course. They're looking at, this is sort of a bullet list of modernizing some of the ramp designs along this 155-mile stretch, looking at pursuing 18-foot vertical clearances for freight, identifying areas for full-depth pavement reconstruction because there are some pavement concerns along Interstate 20, construct one-way frontage roads, considering partnering with bus service providers to initiate an express bus service, as we look for solutions to improve the mobility and improve the congestion along Interstate 20, we're kind of thinking outside the box and looking at some multimodal solutions. Evaluating also the potential for future passenger rail service to include consideration of right-of-way design and innovative financing opportunities. So this has been a broad approach to take a look at how can we solve the problems on Interstate 20. The draft plan recommends, I like to show this slide because it gives you an idea. The price tag that's associated with this plan is about $1.3 billion in pavement, and as shown on the largest part is pavement rehab in purple. Then also additional capacity is about $728 million along this entire stretch. Frontage roads are the next smaller piece of the pie at about $482 million, and then also bridge, ramps, and interchange improvements wrap up those amounts. So doing the pavement alone is about $1.3 billion. Doing the being able to add capacity, widen Interstate 20 in certain sections, adding frontage roads where needed, and then also bridge and ramp improvements is also an additional $1.3 billion. So a very big undertaking. On this slide, you can see some of the improvements to Gregg County. I won't go into the details, but I did do a summary on the previous slide. Board members, you do have maps in your packets as well. Recommendations for Harrison County are shown also in terms of the widening and some of the frontage roads improvements and bridges as well. This slide shows a summary of what I mentioned a moment ago, and this study specifically divides its recommendations into a near-term, mid-term, and also long-term plan. And as you see on the footnote of the slide, this $1.3 billion on the slide for total price tag does not include another $3 billion, to replace the pavement as well. If you would like to see a copy of this map and investigate it further, the draft quarter study recommendations are located on TxDOT's website, as shown on this slide, and they are asking that comments be received by November 7th. And then ultimately, an I-20 Quarter Advisory Committee report will be presented to the Texas Transportation Commission on December 18th, and our chair, Judge Stout, will be making that presentation.
Any questions for Ms. Owen? Thank you, Karen. At this time, we have number 8, citizen comment. Would anyone like to come forward as a citizen and make a comment? As a citizen, I would like to make a comment if no one wants to come forward at this time. There's an election coming up that some of you might be aware of in November. And one of the ballot initiatives is called Proposition 1. And that has to do with transportation dollars. And I would encourage anybody and everybody to get involved and look at that proposition. It's a first step in trying to deal with the transportation needs that are greatly needed to be addressed, and it's going to take funding. And the legislature is focused on trying to find a permanent solution to some of the funding that has gone away over the past years. And so I would encourage the voting public to make sure that if they do vote a straight ticket, at least make sure you don't miss the vote on that particular issue, because it's extremely important for the future of Texas and its transportation needs. Any other comments, suggestions, questions? Anybody from the board? Staff comment? Nobody? I guess I'll have a motion to adjourn. Have a motion, do I have a second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.